Hello everybody, I'm off on my travels again. Some of you may remember that I visited Beijing in January this year. It was freezing. I spent most of my time huddled in my nice warm hotel. I enjoyed myself, and when I got back, just before the year of the dragon struck, I put together one of these episodes, giving some background on China and what I think are the main elements that drive this enormous country forward. I've linked that episode in the description below. I mentioned that we're in a new era of the so-called yellow peril. In the 19th and 20th century, the West did decades-long harm to China, from about the 1840s through the Opium Wars into the Boxer Rebellion of 1899-1901. As an aside, my great-grandfather was there for that conflict. Left for dead on a pile of bodies, somebody noticed he was still breathing. And so here I am. It's worth saying that the aftermath of that rebellion was catastrophic. You may rightly think that the current events in Gaza are horrific and frightful enough, but they pale into insignificance compared to the harm done, the revenge taken by the foreign powers on the Chinese. Beijing was sacked, the Chinese defeated. The Summer Palace, a beautiful area of many buildings, was destroyed entirely and systematically looted. A minimum of 100,000 Chinese died, and some estimates put that at a much higher number of casualties. Most were civilians, and there were multiple rapes by the soldiers of the Eight-Power Alliance. These were the usual suspects: Britain, the United States, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Austro-Hungary. Boxer prisoners and Qing government officials, it was the Qing dynasty, were executed without trial. China, under the Empress Cixi, was forced to pay reparations valued at today's prices of around $1 billion, an enormous sum for the time. It was crippling, and it eventually led to the collapse of the Qing dynasty in 1911. It also laid the foundation for some of the ideas of the communist state that governs People's Republic of China right now, from 1949, all my lifetime. So I was intrigued to see a post on LinkedIn that suggested that China was a shockingly repressive state. It was illustrated by a screenshot from the new Netflix series Three Body Problem. The series is based on the brilliant series of sci-fi novels by the Chinese author Liu Cixin. During the Cultural Revolution, a young astrophysics graduate witnesses her father get beaten to death during a struggle session by Red Guards. To suggest that modern China is anything like this ghastly social upheaval is simply insulting. I said so, and the post seems to have been taken down, fortunately. Still, the use of these images to incite another round of hatred for the Chinese reminded me of the Boxers and their terrible fate. Both events had the goal of, quote, liquidating all harmful pests, and the domestic goal of eliminating bad elements of all descriptions, says the critical scholar Wang Yi. Of course, there are many differences. Nevertheless, it's worth remembering that China has experienced awful instability. The Taiping Rebellion, for example, was a civil war that lasted 14 years, from 1850 to 1864. Estimates of the death toll are between 20 and 30 million people, up to 10% of the Chinese population during that period of time. To prevent that, the Chinese government emphasizes social control. Don't get me wrong, I'm aware as the next person of the repression in Tibet and the plight of the Uyghur people. I dislike the idea of social credit intensely. But the fact is, history proves it, a region this big, with a population this big, can and has spun out of control. China is a vast country with different circumstances and pressures from much smaller countries. That's an explanation, not an excuse. It's a reason for trying to understand more about the place. In any case, I'm off to Yunnan and Guangxi provinces in the southwest, looking at farming livestock and the food supply from the highly productive countries to the southeast. It'll be a very different trip from the one I made to Beijing. Certainly not as cold, at least I hope so. We hope we can do short reports during this trip and be back with another full episode in 2 to 3 weeks. Until then, stay safe.